Yeah. So far, we have discussed about the design of single-ended and differential amplifiers. So we said the whole purpose of designing amplifiers is that you need to be able to amplify signal voltages which are very small in magnitude, or you need to give them some kind of a power amplification. So that's what the whole goal of the design of an amplifier is. Now, generally, the first question that you'll have to ask is, where are these amplifiers used? Amplifiers are used in some of the typical examples that most of us would normally encounter on a daily basis is in television. I mean, in video signals. If you want to amplify video signals, you may want to use them. And then in audio signals. So these are two of very common applications where we encounter, I mean, at least what most of us are used to on a daily basis. The first thing when you have to understand is that when we design an amplifier, we said this amplifier is going to give a gain, let's say A, which means if I apply a sine wave of input frequency F naught, some frequency F1, and a peak amplitude V peak. Yeah, I'll answer all those towards the end of the class. Yeah. So the amplitude of this signal is V peak. Then what do you think will be the amplitude at this point, at the output here? It will be A times V peak, right? So this will be A times V peak. Now the amplification gain here has no dependence on the frequency of the input. So which means whether I apply a low frequency signal, so for example, audio signals bandwidth, I mean the maximum frequency. So for example, what, let's say humans, what we are typically speaking, if you take Fourier transform of the signal, you will find most of the frequency content present within 20 kilohertz. Okay, so what I'm speaking right now, or most of the speech signals or songs, if you're hearing any songs, if you just pass it through a microphone, it will convert to an electrical signal, and that electrical signal, if you take its Fourier transform, it will be less than 20 kilohertz. So all its energy will be less than 20 kilohertz. All the Fourier transform will be less than 20 kilohertz. Similarly, for video signals, it will be in the order of few megahertz. Okay, it will be in the order of few megahertz. So generally we define the band of signals of interest. So meaning for an audio signal, the band, if I say the frequency band of any signal is the range of frequencies for which the signal has finite power, the range of frequencies in which the signal has a finite energy. So this is the range of frequencies where the signal has a finite energy. So typically, if I ask you what is the bandwidth here, only positive frequencies. If I ask you what is the bandwidth or what is the frequency range, we can roughly say it's 20 kilohertz. Okay, it's roughly we can say it's 20 kilohertz. Now the question is, if I'm going to design an amplifier which is supposedly it's supposed to amplify audio signals, which means it should be able to amplify signals in this entire frequency range. So which means if I, for example, apply a sine wave, let's say I'm applying a sine wave of frequency 100 hertz. 100 hertz, I'm applying a sine wave of frequency, low frequency sine wave. I should expect an amplified version of this sine wave. Frequency should be same, but it should be an amplified version of this 100 hertz sine wave. Similarly, if I apply a sine wave of frequency 10 kilohertz, okay, it should be able to give me the same, because this is an amplifier which is supposed to give me an amplified version of the 10 kilohertz signal without altering its frequencies. That we said is a property which comes from linearity. Okay, so if it's a linear system, then you should expect the frequency to be exactly the same at the output, and it should be an amplified version of the input signal. So here the thing is that if I'm saying the amplifier is supposed to amplify in a band of frequencies, then we are interested in knowing, is it actually going to give me same gain for 100 hertz, or is it going to give me the same gain for 10 kilohertz as well? Okay, so the study of this profile of a gain as a function of frequency is what we call frequency response. There are different understandings of frequency response. I'll try to give you what are we going to study And why are we studying frequency response? You should understand that. I gave you an example. Take a speech signal, for example. If you take its Fourier transform, most of its Fourier transform will lie from probably DC, little away from DC to 20 kilohertz. Your Fourier, if you, I'm only showing the positive side of the Fourier transform. Okay, so the positive frequency axis. So most of your Fourier transform will lie in this range, which means for a good audio signal amplifier, the amplifier should be able to give me gain in this entire range of frequencies. So far when we did this analysis, we never saw the gain dependence on frequency. Okay, now why will the gain depend on frequency? We'll come to that. But the question is, what we have analyzed so far, we have always seen that we just found the DC gain, and the gain here was independent of F naught. There was no F naught in the equation of gain expression. Okay, the gain was independent of the frequency itself. But now in reality, that will not be the case. The gain will actually be a function of frequency. So therefore, it's very important to know what is the frequency response. As I change my input sinusoid's frequency, I'm going to apply a sine wave to this amplifier. And then what I'm going to do is change the frequency of the sine wave. I'll gradually increase the frequency of sine wave all the way from 0 till infinity. I'll change the frequency starting from DC 0 to an infinite frequency. I'll keep on increasing it to a very high frequency and observe what is the gain profile of this amplifier looks like. For each frequency, you will measure the gain and then you tabulate all the gain values and plot it as a function of frequency. So this response is called frequency response. Now, what do you get from frequency response? I mean, frequency response is fine. So what do you interpret from frequency response? If you look at the frequency response, if you know that from the frequency response, if you see that your amplifier gain is constant over a range of frequencies, and it turns out that range of frequencies, okay, yeah, I'll come to that. So yeah, one of you're asking is, when I'm changing the frequency, am I keeping the amplitude constant? Yes, you are keeping the amplitude constant. Amplitude is fixed. So in frequency response, when you are measuring the frequency response, you change the frequency, drive this amplifier with different inputs, and record all the data at the outside. Okay, so it's like you're measuring and looking at the data. Now, frequency response is a very powerful tool for engineers, because by looking at the frequency response, you will know in what range of frequencies your amplifier will give you a near constant gain. Once you know that, you can use that for an audio amplifier application. So typically, if you want to use this in an audio amplifier application, you will know that my amplifier gain should be nearly constant till 20 kilohertz. So that's something that if your amplifier gives this kind of a frequency response graph, then you know that it's suited for an audio amplifier applications. Okay. Now sometimes, so for example, in the area, I think now there is a craze for neuroscience and all of that. So if you're recording neural signals will have much lower bandwidths. It will be in the order of few tenths of hertz, less than that. Neural signal bandwidths will be much smaller. The frequencies that your brain waves generate when you're recording them using let's say using these electrodes, the brain wave signals will be of much lower frequency. The thing with whenever you make any measurement, whenever you're sensing any signal, you will also pick up unwanted noise, random signals which you're not intended to hear. So that will also be present here. So it will contain this is the Fourier transform. And let's say my signal of interest is from 0 to some frequency FB. This is what your Fourier transform of a signal is. But you have two other signals adding on to this. So for example, let's assume x1 of t is your intended signal which you want to amplify. But you have x2 of t and x3 of t added to this. So these two are, let's assume, two different noise sources. What I have shown here is the positive side of Fourier transform. I have only shown the positive frequencies here. Okay. For any real signal, what will be the negative side of the Fourier transform? What will be x of minus f? For a real signal, what will be x of minus f? Now, is it mirror of x of f or something else? See, what is x of f? First, okay, let me finish this, and then I'll come back to our definitions of x of f and all of that. So first, what I'm telling you here is that if you take Fourier transform, you are saying that you have your intended signal here and two unwanted signals as well. Now you want to remove these two components. If you want to remove these two components, then I need to pass it through a system. I need to multiply this Fourier transform with some function, maybe let's say it looks like this. Meaning with some function, it looks like this, which means, or let me probably draw in a simpler way, with some function which looks like this. I'm multiplying my Fourier transform. So by now, you know what convolutions and all that, right? So if you take a signal x of t and pass it through a system with an impulse response x h of t, what will be your output in time domain? It will be convolution of x of t times h of t, right? This is your time domain response. Yes. And in frequency domain, what will be the response? If I ask you in frequency domain, y of f will be x of f times h of f. Okay. So what happens is that frequency domain gets multiplied. In frequency domain, it's multiplication. So the thing about the system is that if you know the frequency response of your system, all you need to do is take your frequency response of the system and multiply it with the input frequency response, input signals frequency response, or Fourier transform. So that's what I'm saying now. This happens to be some h of f, some system's frequency response, and you're passing it through and you're multiplying it with this. So what will happen at the output? If I pass this, if I'm going to multiply x of f with this, what will be y of f? So let's call, will x2 and x3 be present in the output? x2 and x3 will not be present. So this operation is what we call filtering. It is filtering. Filtering is an operation where we remove unwanted components. So I have now filtered out by removing an unwanted component. Now to design a filter, again, you need to know its frequency response. So an amplifier can also be used as a filter if designed properly. So in that case, that's where the idea of frequency response comes in handy. If you know the frequency response of an amplifier, or if you can modify the frequency response of an amplifier, then it can be used in different applications. If you want to use it as an amplifier, then first thing you need to ask is, what is the frequency content of my input signal? What is the range of frequencies for which my input signal's Fourier transform is non-zero? So I've just told it purely in mathematical terms. That is the range of frequencies in which your signal has energy. Okay, finite energy in that range of frequencies. If you know that range of frequencies, then the first thing you look at is the frequency response of the amplifier. If you want to amplify the input signal, then you should look at the frequency response of the input of the system or the amplifier through which you are passing it through. And from that, you will get an idea that whether this amplifier will be able to amplify the signal or not. If not, you will probably tweak. If you later we will see we can actually modify the transfer functions and all that. You can tweak the frequency response so that it will function as an amplifier. Okay, so that's where Fourier transforms and frequency response comes in very handy. So the next fundamental question is, why frequency response? Why are we feeding sinusoids and looking at it? That's a very fundamental question, because by now you're aware that any signal x of t can be represented as a sum of sinusoids, can be decomposed into a sum of sinusoids, right? So that's what Fourier transform tells you. Fourier transform tells you, for example, if let's say there is a standard vector algebra analogy to Fourier transform, let's assume you have a two-dimensional space. This is your x-axis and this is your y-axis, x cap, y cap, or orthonormal vectors with unit magnitude. Now, any point in the two-dimensional space can be represented by the sum of by x cap and y cap. So any point, I can find its x projection and I can find its y projection and represent that point as a x cap plus b y cap. This is basic coordinate geometry. In the same way, sinusoids also form what we call an orthonormal basis space. Okay, so therefore any signal with finite energy can be represented as a linear combination, or rather can be represented as a sum of sinusoids with scaled amplitudes. Now you should visualize the same way. Now for example, if I'm writing A here, what is A here? A is the projection of the vector on the x-axis. Similarly, the Fourier coefficients or the Fourier transform happens to be the projections of the signal in that sinusoidal signal space. So in your mind, you can imagine those sinusoids, all those different frequency sinusoids, as n dimensions of an n-dimensional space. What you are doing when you're computing Fourier transform is you're projecting your time domain signal onto each one of those dimensions or axes, and then computing this coefficient. Okay, so that's called, what you do, for example, when you perform this integral operation, integral of x of t, what you are doing here, e power j omega naught t dt, what you are doing by this operation is that you are taking your signal x of t, multiplying it with a single frequency omega naught of t, and integrating it. So this operation is like a projection operation. You're projecting your signal onto this frequency and making a note of what is that value. So and then you'll keep on changing this frequency, find different projections, and you will get different values of x of omega. That's your Fourier transform. Okay, so you can visualize this way, that you can, if you have two orthonormal vector spaces, you can span any point in the two-dimensional space. Similarly, conceptually it is very similar. The words might sound pretty somewhat complicated, but it's a very, very simple idea. Extend it in the same way here. This is a two-dimensional space. Any point in the two-dimensional space can be spanned by these two orthonormal vectors. So any point in the two-dimensional space can be represented as a linear combination of these two orthonormal vectors. I can also say these two orthonormal vectors spans this entire two-dimensional space. Okay, so using a bunch of sinusoids, here you have an infinite sinusoids, so it's like an infinite dimensional space, where now the signal becomes a point in that infinite dimensional space. Okay, and x of omega is the coordinates of those, or is the coordinates of that point along each dimension. Okay, think about it. It's just that there is a geometric interpretation for that. What you're computing x of omega, the Fourier transform, essentially it's actually a projection of the signal onto different dimensions. It's just the coordinates along each axis. So your signal now becomes a point in that space. Okay, so this later helps when you look at communication signals and all of that, but this is the interpretation for that. Now we'll come back to our basic idea here. So what we have just discussed is that any signal x of t can be represented as a linear combination of sinusoids. If it's a periodic signal, then we use Fourier series, right? If it's a periodic signal, you will need Fourier series. So you will need Fourier series. You will need a sum of sinusoids to represent them. If it's an aperiodic signal, you will need a large number of continuously spaced sine waves to represent the signal x of t. Okay, so the whole point is Fourier transform tells you that any signal can be represented as a bunch of sinusoids, which means all I need to do is that, since I know any system can be represented as a bunch of sinusoids, if I understand how does an amplifier behave for sinusoids, if I understood how does an amplifier behave for sinusoidal inputs, then I can understand the amplifier's response for any kind of an input. So that's the whole idea of frequency response. So if I understand, why are we interested in measuring the frequency response? Because what are we doing in frequency response? We are feeding sinusoids of different frequencies. So F1, F2, F3, F4, and so on. And I'm making a note of H of F1, H of F2, and so on. What is H of F? I said frequency response. What exactly is H of F? If you have at least studied frequency response, what information does H of F contain? So for example, if I'm feeding an input of this type, A cos omega naught t, I'm feeding an input of this type, A cos omega naught t. Can you tell me, see, what are the unique properties of a sinusoid? What are the unique properties of a sinusoid? Yeah, what are the unique properties of sinusoid? One is the amplitude, right? You need to know the amplitude of the sine wave, frequency of the sine wave. In fact, I haven't written the third parameter, which is phase. So there are three important parameters of a sinusoid. You have amplitude, frequency, and phase. These are the three important parameters of a sinusoid. Now, if I pass a sinusoid through a linear system, will frequency change here? Will omega not change? It's a linear system. So frequency will not change, okay, right? If you pass this through a linear system, frequency will not change. So the only quantities which can change is the amplitude and the phase. These are the only two quantities which can change because it's an amplifier. If you are passing through an amplifier, of course, the amplitude is going to change. The amplitude of the sine wave will change. And the system by itself can introduce some kind of delays. It might delay the signal. We will see what causes delay a little later, but it might introduce delays. So it's going to change phase. Now, all I need to know is if I pass a sinusoid through a system, I need to know what is the amplifier's frequency. I need to know what is the amplifier's gain at that frequency. Okay, the output frequency is going to be the same. And if I know this frequency response h of omega, I can exactly predict. Let me call a dash cos omega naught t plus phi dash here. What will be the value of a dash? What is the amplitude of the sine wave at the output of your system? What is the amplitude of the sine wave at the output of the system? Okay, that will be simply mod of h of omega. You take its magnitude here of the frequency response and multiply it with the input amplitude. That gives you the amplitude of the output sine wave. And what about the phase of the sine wave? What about the phase of the sine wave? Phase gets added. See, and again, you can see these are all these are very, it trivially follows from complex analysis. Any signal again can be represented as a e power j omega naught t. I can represent it as, this is called as a complex sinusoid, right? This is a complex sinusoid. If I feed a complex sinusoid to this system, so the phi will be j omega t plus phi to the system. I'm going to multiply it with its frequency response. So a into h of omega naught times e power j omega naught t plus phi. Now h of omega is a complex number again. H of omega frequency response is again a complex number, right? Fourier transform itself is a complex number because you're going to multiply them with complex exponential. If you see Fourier transform computation, it involves complex exponentials. So you will get, it will be a complex number. Fourier transform itself will be a complex number. So h of omega I can say is a complex number. Therefore, h of omega I can write it as in a polar form. So amplitude multiplied by phase, which will be j angle of h of omega naught times a e power j omega naught t plus phi. Now what will happen here? I can write this as a single sinusoid of frequency because the frequency is the same. It will be a into mod of h of omega naught times e power j omega naught t plus phi plus angle of h of omega naught. Okay, angle of h of omega naught, you'll have to compute it. So how do you find? So this h of omega naught is a complex number. So for a complex number, you can find its phase and magnitude. So now look at it. If you know the frequency response, you can exactly predict what will be the amplitude of the sine wave if you feed an input sine wave of a certain amplitude and phase. Okay, so that's the information frequency response contains. And if you have an information of this frequency response h of omega naught, okay, so in fact, how will you, for example, if you're a novice and you're performing this experiment, that's what you're going to do. You're going to feed a sine wave and you're going to record the amplitude of the output sine wave. So that will be this. And you will also record the phase of the output sine wave. you will have a record of the phase and the amplitude. So you will divide the amplitude by the input amplitude, then you will get mod of h of omega naught. And then if you compute the phase of the output sine wave and subtract it from the input phase, you will get e power j h of omega naught. So then you get your frequency response. This is a complex number. So now you have a record of the frequency response. And what is the reason why we need frequency response? If you know the response of the system for sinusoids, then you know the response, you can predict the response of the system for any kind of an input. Because any input, at least most inputs in practice, finite energy inputs, can be represented as a sum of sinusoids. So that's the whole idea behind why do we find frequency response. Okay, so we just introduced frequency response, but fundamentally, there are two things we need to know when we talk about a system. So a system can be an amplifier. An amplifier can be a simple system. I can just apply an input here, an output, and then call this as a system. Okay, there are two things you need to know. Yes, of course, this is very important. Frequency response is very important. You need to know frequency response because you need to know in what range of frequencies the amplifier will give you sufficient gain. That is very important because if your input lies in that range of frequencies, then it's good. It's going to completely amplify your input signal. Second, the second application of frequency response is if you know there are some unwanted frequencies in your input signal and you want to remove them, having a knowledge of frequency response definitely helps. Or you can tailor make your frequency response in such a way that it can reject those unwanted components. So it can behave as a filter. Okay, so that's a big area in itself. How to design filters is a big area in itself. The whole idea is that you can design the frequency response as per your need, okay, to filter out unwanted signals or amplify signals in a certain range of interest, frequency range of interest. So that's the whole motivation behind it. But before doing that, frequency response, it tells you what signals you can amplify and what signals you can reject. But it doesn't really fully tell you whether the system itself is stable. Because any system, when you're designing, the first thing you have to keep in mind is the system stable? What do you mean if the system is stable? If you are going to feed a bounded input, if you're going to feed a small bounded input, you should expect a bounded output. If your output is just growing unbounded, then in that case, it means the system is unstable. Okay? An unstable system is one in which even for a bounded input, even if you feed a small input to the system, if the output of the system just grows unbounded, then the system is unstable. So you need to know two things. First thing you need to know is that, is the system that I'm going to design, is it stable? Then the second thing you need to know is its frequency response. Do you know what is the range of frequencies that it can amplify and what are the range of frequencies it can reject or filter out? So that information, the range of frequencies, is given by frequency response. Okay, and frequency response makes sense for LTI systems. Okay, now the next question is stability. So the hallmark of so there are other things. Some of you are stating the system has to be causal. Yeah, I'll come to that one by one. The other important property or test for stability is that if you apply an input sine wave, your output, either it can become unbounded or it can be oscillating, an oscillatory response, and this oscillatory frequency, the oscillation frequency is independent of the input frequency. Because for a linear, keep this in, it's a very important point, for a linear time invariant system, LTI, it should be linear and time invariant. If it's a linear and time invariant system, if you feed a certain input frequency, the output frequency should only contain the input frequency. It should not contain any other frequencies. Okay, time invariance is also imposed here. It's not a pure linearity constraint because there are systems which can be linear, but they will not be time invariant. Okay, so, and in those systems, you can get frequencies which are not present in the input. So let me ask you a simple question. If you have a signal x of t, and the system is a multiplier, it's multiplying a signal cos omega naught t into x of t. The output is is x of t into cos omega naught t. So can you tell me if the system is linear? Is the system linear? So how do you test linearity of a system? No, look at it. I mean, how do you test linearity of a system? Yeah, two things, right? First, scale it. If you increase your inputs by a factor A, output should also increase by the same factor. It increases, right? Your y of t, if you increase the input by a factor x of t, output y of t also increases by the same amount. So y dash of t is a times y of t. So that is principle of homogeneity. What about superposition? Apply x1, you will get a certain output. Apply x2, you will get a certain output. If you feed x1 plus x2, you should get y1 plus y2 as the output. Okay, so therefore it is a linear system. This is a linear system. But the thing is it time invariant? So shift your input by tau seconds. Shift your input by tau seconds. Your y of t is going to be x of t minus tau into cos of omega naught t. What's your y of t minus tau? Your output should also shift by tau seconds. Only then it's a time invariant system. So x of y minus tau should be this x of t minus tau multiplied by omega naught t minus omega naught tau. This should be your output. Therefore, this system is not equal to this. Therefore, it's not a time invariant. This is a time varying system. If it's a time varying system, so now can you tell me, for example, I'll take some examples. If let's assume x of t is a sine wave of frequency omega naught. If x of t, let's assume is cos omega naught t. What will be the output here? Let's assume x of t is cos omega naught t. What will be your output at the output of the system? Cos square omega naught t, right? It's cos square omega naught t. Now if I expand cos square omega naught t, it will be 1 plus cos 2 omega naught t by 2. So now, if you look at the input Fourier transform, you will have frequency energy at omega naught, right? That's impulse, right? The Fourier transform of a cosine signal is an impulse. Sinusoid is an impulse. You will have impulse will be at omega naught. Can you tell me what will be the frequency of the output? What are the frequencies present in the output? What are the frequencies present in the output? So you have two frequencies, two terms. One, and then you have cos 2 omega naught t. One can be written as cos of 0 omega naught, 0 into t. Cos 0 into t. So you have two frequencies. You have 0 and 2 omega naught. See, now you have applied an input frequency of omega naught, but at the output you are getting two different frequencies, 0 and 2 omega naught. Therefore, this is not the output frequencies are not same as the input frequencies. Even though the system is linear, because it violates time invariance, you will end up seeing frequencies which are not present in the input. Yes, I'm only considering, of course, see, Fourier transform is a mathematical representation. Frequencies, we consider only the positive frequencies for frequency response. See, that's what, when you're analyzing it mathematically, we do consider negative as well. But as far as the amplifier design is concerned, yes, we look at only the positive, because that positive frequencies make sense, right? Yeah. Negative frequency, it just comes from the artifact. It's a mathematical artifact, because you want to construct a sine wave, you need two phasors, one with plus omega naught, another with minus omega naught. So that's where the negative frequency comes. Okay. So, but it's just positive frequencies are the frequencies of interest. If I say 0, it's a sine wave of 0 frequency. Omega naught, you will know that the sine wave will undergo one cycle in 2 pi by omega naught seconds. 2 omega naught, it will undergo two cycles in that duration. So that's frequency, right? Frequency is a measure of how fast your signal progresses in time. Okay, or how frequently it repeats itself. Yeah. Okay. So that's the idea here. So what you know here is that if it's a linear system, you know that the output frequency will be same as the input frequency. It cannot be different at all. If it's a LTI system, linear and time invariance, if both the conditions are imposed, the output frequency can never be different from the input frequency. Okay, so that's a fundamental property. But what you're seeing is you're feeding a signal of omega naught, and you are seeing a frequency of output 10 omega naught, or some weird response which is just keeps on oscillating. It just keeps on oscillating. Even then, I can still consider this system as an oscillatory system. Even this is an unstable system. So that's what we will see at a later stage. Where will we get such systems? Okay, where we will end up getting such responses. So there are two things you need to know. First thing you need to know is the system stable itself? So to study the stability of a system, we use Laplace transforms. So what is the reason why we go for Laplace transforms? Why do we need Laplace transforms in the first place? It comes with a host of advantages, few advantages. What is Laplace transform? Why do I need Laplace? What is the advantage of them? Yes. So one of you wrote, if you generally most linear time invariant systems can be represented by linear differential equations. I gave you an example. If you take a simple RC circuit, you can write a linear differential equation relating input voltage and output voltage. Okay, this can be expressed as a simple first order differential equation. The thing with Laplace transforms is that if you apply Laplace transforms, these differential equations can be transformed into simple linear algebraic polynomial equations. And we have a rich literature on how to solve polynomial equations, how to solve polynomials or algebraic equations. We have a lot of literature available there. All that literature can then be used in solving linear time invariant systems. So that's one of the major advantages of Laplace transforms. If you go for Laplace transforms, linear differential equations can be transformed into algebraic equations. Okay, polynomials in S. And we already know how to solve polynomials very well. And if you want to find the output response of any system, all you need to do is to solve these polynomials, and you already have the output response. It becomes much simpler in analysis. So that is why we go for Laplace analysis. Laplace transforms also, by the knowledge of the roots of what we call the characteristic equation, by the knowledge of those roots, we can actually predict if a system is stable or not. So since at least I'm assuming most of you have done Laplace transform, so a Laplace transform H of S is more like a superset. Laplace transform, if you evaluate Laplace transform along S equal to j omega, what do you get? Frequency response, right? You get frequency response. You get the frequency response. So a Laplace transform essentially is a three-dimensional plot. If you look at H of S, okay, S is a complex number here. So sigma j omega. Now what you do is that you normally compute Laplace transform for a system. For a system that will give you what we call the transfer function H of S. From the knowledge of the transfer function, we can very easily find out if the system is stable or not. Okay, that's the power of Laplace transform. It will give you all the information. If you know Laplace transform, from the knowledge of Laplace transform, you can say if the system is stable or not, whether it will produce desired outputs or not. The second thing that you will know is that if you take Laplace transform and evaluate the Laplace transform at S equal to j omega, then you get frequency response information as well. You also get the frequency response information from this knowledge of Laplace transforms. So that's why H of S is a complete data of the system. It holds the entire data of a system. It tells you whether the system is stable or not. And if you find its transfer function at S equal to j omega, you can also know its frequency response. So it's more of a superset. Okay. So of course, you need to measure frequency response by feeding sinusoids. But if you have the Laplace transform of a system, knowledge of Laplace transform of a system, you have everything you need. You also have frequency response information embedded into it. Okay. So that's the advantage of Laplace transform. I can say if my system is stable or not, amplifier is stable or not. Once you know the amplifier is stable, the next step you need to know is what are the range of frequencies for which the amplifier will amplify. That's the next step you need to know. Okay, that knowledge will come from frequency response. So the study of this for different amplifier for amplifiers is will be the topic of discussions for the next few lectures. We'll take different amplifiers and see how they behave as a function of frequency. Now the question is, why does amplifiers gain depend on frequency? That's the next question we need to answer. Why does amplifiers gain depend on frequency? When we were finding, for example, let's take a simple common source amplifier. If you take a simple common source amplifier, the gain of this common source amplifier is minus of GM/0. Now you see here, there is no dependence on frequency. There is no dependence on S or omega naught. So now then, where does this dependence on frequency come about? The dependence comes on capacitive loads in amplifier circuits. Now in any most amplifiers, or you can take, where does this capacitive load come from? Where does this capacitances come from? They can come from the devices themselves. So the structure of the devices itself, when you build a device, a MOS device, you get inherently some capacitances, parasitic capacitances associated with the device itself. Or when you're feeding it to a load, for example, I'm just giving an example. This is just a small example. This is the load you will normally encounter in your digital circuits. So let's assume you have an inverter, or an inverter can also be seen as an amplifier, which is driving a wire, right? It's driving a wire, and it's driving another inverter which is located from a long distance from the wire. Now the wire is again a metal plate, right? The wire is nothing but a metal wire, and there will also be a ground wire. So every wire you need to have a return path for a circuit from Kirchhoff's current law. You are now aware that for every circuit, if there is current being drawn, there needs to be a return path, right? Return path follows from what? From Kirchhoff's current law, right? You know that if you have a voltage source supplying a certain amount of current, the current has to be supplied back. So there has to be a loop. There has to be a return path that directly follows from Kirchhoff's current law. So the current leaving this voltage source should exactly be equal to current entering this voltage source. So same way, anywhere if current is leaking out, it has to have a return path. So if this inverter is charging some wire, you need to have a return path through this metal plate. Now anytime you have such a combination, now look at this, you have one metal plate, another metal plate, and there is an air gap or some dielectric gap in between them. So you know this will naturally form a capacitor structure. Now if I give you the dimensions, length and the width here, what will be the capacitance of this region? And I'm also giving you the epsilon of your dielectric constant of the material in between the two metal plates. Let's call it epsilon. What will then be the capacitance? Yes, epsilon into A upon distance, not length, distance between the two parallel plates. Okay, so it will be epsilon into area here is W into L into W. That's just two metal plate capacitors by the distance between the two plates, which is D. So this is what we call parasitic capacitance. So you cannot avoid such structures in integrated circuits and an amplifier. Whenever you are building an amplifier, eventually the amplifier will drive some wires and the load. Now there are other reasons for that. I'll come to that. So one of you are asking, why do we keep these two plates close by? Okay, so there are some electromagnetics based reasons for that. We will come to that later. Okay, I'll probably answer it at a different time. But right now, you can assume that you'll have an inherent capacitance when you're driving a plate, a wire. So, and also MOSFETs themselves, we will discuss about the MOSFET models in the next class, will also have capacitors between gate to source and gate to drain. If let's say this common source amplifier is driving another common source amplifier, then the gate to source capacitance of this MOSFET and the gate to drain capacitance of this MOSFET will act like a capacitance for the first stage. Okay, will act like a capacitance for the first plate. So because now the thing is that if I have a capacitor as my load, what will be the gain expression? Let's assume I'm including R naught here. What will be the gain expression? What happens to the impedance of your capacitance? What happens to the impedance of your capacitance? Does it depend on frequency or not? Yeah. So the thing with capacitor is that once you have capacitors in the circuit, the thing with capacitors is that the impedance, the resistance offered by the impedance offered by the capacitance will depend on frequency, and therefore your gain will also start depending on frequency. The dependence on gain on frequency comes from the impedances which depend on frequency. Okay, so because you have an impedance which depends on frequency, the gain also depends on the frequency. So that's the whole idea here. And in the next class, we will see what happens. How do we analyze now? If you know that there are capacitive loads, how do we analyze it? And what information can we draw out of it from the knowledge of Laplace transforms and from the knowledge of frequency response? So this is what we are going to do in the upcoming lectures. Okay, I'll stop at this point.